So I'm recording this one at night. Spooky. Responses to exercise. We are starting to look at that. So this is chapter 7 in your textbook, which starts at page 143. We're looking at the acute changes. So the difference between acute and chronic, acute being the ones that happen as a result of, exercise almost instantaneously, and then the chronic ones are those ones as a result of your training program. So hopefully by the end of this video, you're going to be able to understand what the acute response to exercise are, and you're going to be able to recall and explain 3. When you go in 3. So when we begin to exercise, our body changes. Okay, it increases, heart rate, breathing, and a whole raft of other things happen. Okay, that's just in a nutshell. Okay, like I said, breathing deeper, faster, heart rate, because the muscles require blood. So obviously the heart has to supply more, we need more oxygen, so on and so forth. The responses are also determined by how intense the activity is. So if I get up and go for a walk around, go to the kitchen and grab something to eat and then come back, the response is going to be minimal, as opposed to if I was to, jump up out of my chair, go sprint to the front gate, which is probably, 50 meters, maybe a little bit of an exaggeration, but it might be like 50 meters, 60 meters return trip. Okay, so there would be a difference in my heart rate and everything there. So those ones that happen like instantly, and they're only very short-term responses, like increased breathing rate, increased heart rate, they're called the acute responses. So let's look at the respiratory responses. First of all, what we'll do is, rather than the energy systems video, which was this massive long 2-hour session, I'm going to break these down into individual sections. So we're going to look at the respiratory, we're going to look at the cardiovascular, and we'll look at the muscular systems in 3 separate videos. Hopefully it won't be quite so bad. So the respiratory system, it delivers oxygen to the working muscles. We know that. I hope you do. At the beginning of exercise, the receptors in the working muscles send signals to the brain that they need more oxygen. Okay, so then the breathing rate increases. So ventilation. Ventilation is basically what happens when you breathe. Okay, there's a number of different measurements that we use to measure that. Tidal volume, and you're going to need to commit these to your memory because they will probably pop up in the exam at some point, or you'll need to refer to them. So tidal volume is the amount of air inhaled and exhaled in one breath. Tidal volume. Okay. Pulmonary or minute ventilation is the amount of air inhaled and exhaled every minute. Okay, so that's doing, tidal volume over a minute. So men have a higher tidal volume compared to women. Sorry guys, sorry girls. Why? The reason being, obviously males are larger. They have a larger chest cavity. So they're going to have a larger set of lungs, therefore they're going to have a higher tidal volume. But it differs from person to person. You may find some of the ladies with a bigger tidal volume. These are just the average numbers. So if we look at our table there, we can see the respiratory rate, which is the number of breaths per minute at rest. On average, it's about 12. At 40 to 50% of your maximum heart rate, it probably increases to about 25, and then almost at 100%, 85, 95, it increases to about 60. So we can work out our ventilation rate based on those numbers. So if we take the lovely ladies and we look at 0.5 liters of breath, and we times the number by 12, we get our minute ventilation, which is 6 litres. And you can see, as a result of exercise, just how much it actually increases. So at almost 100% of your max heart rate, you are breathing in 150 litres per minute of air. That's quite a bit, given that you're only using 6 at rest. Not going to do prac. But what I would like you to do is stop the video for a sec, and even if it's just to, go run a few laps around your house if you can, or up and down the street, or whatever it might be, just go for a quick run and just see what does actually happen to your respiratory system. Okay, sit there quietly for a minute, record the number of breaths that you're taking in that minute, and I want you to get up, I want you to go for a run up and down, do it like 3 or 4 times, and then sit down again quietly for a minute and just see what's happened to your respiratory rate. And then you can try and work out your ventilation rate. Look, see? I got ahead of myself. I already got you to do that. All right, you just can't do it in partners. So remember, number of breaths times 0.5 if you're a girl, or 0.6 if you're a boy. Then I want you to answer these questions. Okay, what we might do is, if you can, I will create a document in Excel, and I'll put it on Teams. What I want you to do is I want you to go in, I want you to put your respiratory rate in that document. Okay, then we'll work out the class averages. So we can see here that we have a difference between a trained and an untrained athlete. This graph shows the it shows the ventilation rate in breaths per minute, not BPM being beats per minute, but breaths per minute. So a trained athlete at rest will probably be taking somewhere in the vicinity of maybe like 8-9 breaths per minute. The untrained athlete, which is the orange line, will probably be taking somewhere in about that 11-12 breaths per minute. And you can see that there's a big difference in the trained and untrained athlete. The untrained athlete at the peak of exercise is breathing roughly 57, 58 breaths per minute, whereas the trained athlete is miles below that. I can't find my mouse, but we've got this sort of difference here, which is huge. What are the reasons for that, do you think? So the trained athlete, if you haven't already figured it out, is probably going to have a more efficient respiratory system, which means that their lungs and their basically everything, the lungs, the cardiorespiratory, all that sort of stuff is going to be more efficient. So they're going to be taking in more oxygen and being able to use more oxygen or more air compared to the untrained athlete. So their system is just that much more efficient compared to the untrained athlete. Okay, so I've got to have another go at this because it didn't work. Diffusion. I'm not going to get ahead of myself this time because I did last time. The gaseous exchange, so the swapping of gases, the oxygen and the carbon dioxide, it happens at the capillary interface, which is where these little arrows are here. Okay, I'm not going to scribble all over my picture either again. When we breathe in, we're breathing in a whole heap of oxygen. Okay, there's obviously other chemicals within the air, but we're breathing in air. Okay, the body uses the oxygen. So what happens is the gases that are exchanged, they always move from high pressure to a low pressure. Okay, you've probably heard this and you might remember it from year 11 PE, who knows? You might remember it from other means, science, biology, whatever. So the O2, this fella here, let's draw him. He moves from the alveoli, okay, where you've breathed in. So you've got a lung full of air, that's got to go into the capillaries, okay? There's a low concentration of oxygen in the capillaries. All right, so he's going to move into there, and the carbon dioxide, where there's plenty of that, is going to move from the capillaries into the alveoli, and then it's going to continue on its merry way out, whereas our oxygen, he's going to continue on around through the body and go to the muscles. Let's watch this video. She sounds kind of like a bit of a hippie. Nothing against hippies, but that's what I thought.
Gas exchange. All of our cells need energy. They get it by breaking down glucose, a simple sugar we get from food. This process, called cellular respiration, uses oxygen and produces carbon dioxide as waste. The main function of the respiratory system is to provide the oxygen from out of the air and remove the carbon dioxide into the air. This takes place in the lungs, with the gases carried to and from the cells by the bloodstream. The exchange of gases between the blood and the air occurs in the alveoli, microscopic air sacs in the lungs that are surrounded by tiny blood vessels. When we inhale, all 300 million alveoli expand and fill with air. Oxygen diffuses from the alveoli into the blood, and carbon dioxide diffuses from the blood into the alveoli. Diffusion is the natural movement of gas or liquid particles from an area of higher concentration to an area of lower concentration. Think of how the smell of baking biscuits spreads out from the oven right through the house. Diffusion can even take place through a membrane if the particles are small enough to get through it. For example, a helium balloon that's been left for a couple of days gets smaller and softer because the helium has slowly diffused through the skin of the balloon into the surrounding air. The walls of the alveoli are membranes too, ones that oxygen and carbon dioxide can diffuse through.
I can't even say it how she says it.
Because breathing keeps bringing fresh air into the lungs and the circulatory system keeps bringing blood that is low in oxygen and high in carbon dioxide, diffusion always acts to bring oxygen into the body and take carbon dioxide out. And this goes on day in, day out, for every minute of our lives, so that our cells stay alive and so that we stay alive.
That's a good thing. So, that's diffusion.
Gas exchange.
So, can you pause the video here and go and complete the questions, all questions on page 146. There are 5 of them. And here are the questions, just in case you're too lazy to open your textbook, but you will have to, because there is a graph that you need to look at on page 145, unless I show you it, which is that graph. But, you know, open your textbook, don't be lazy. That is the end of the respiratory section. The next video we'll move on and we'll look at the cardiovascular responses to exercise.